Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, everybody. As usual, it's really odd because I can't see you. If it's difficult for me to sort of like see what's going on. So if you've got questions or anything's not clear, please pop it in the chat. I'll try and make sure that we're looking after you as we go along. I'm going to ask you to do a little task for me, if you don't mind, just to make a bit of a point about what we're going to be talking about today. So if you could grab a pen and a bit of paper. And I'd like you to draw a rectangle on the paper and draw a line underneath the rectangle. I hope you're keeping up. I'd like you to then draw a circle. And inside that circle, I'd like you to draw 8 other circles, 8 smaller circles in a triangle. And then underneath that, draw a big oval shape. And inside that, 3 circles. So I've given you some really, really clear, specific instructions as part of that. So I'm fairly sure that all of you will have drawn a snowman that looks pretty much exactly like that. Could you just share in the chat that you have just confirmed that you have successfully drawn a snowman that looks exactly like that? That'd be very helpful. Just so that we can be clear that we're all on the same page. We all know what's been going on. So I'm assuming from the not confirming that that's gone exactly like it is, that's not gone quite exactly like it is. I never understand why, to be perfectly honest, because I use the exact same instructions every time. It's the same instructions that I use to draw that myself, and people just seem unable to draw a snowman. And I'm kind of interested to know why, which is the reason we're here, which is how do you get other people to help you? As a manager, it's a really, really difficult thing to get used to, especially as a new manager. We covered last time, if you came to the last session, about how meetings are your job now. The first thing you have to do as a new manager is let go of the fact that you're an expert in something. So that's hard enough. The extension of then getting other people to do something that you understand how to do very well is really, really hard. So why do we delegate? Why do we bother when we could just do it ourselves? So the thing, I was a terrible manager. I was an absolutely terrible manager when I first started doing this. And I had to learn all of these things that we're going to be talking about kind of piecemeal over the course of several years. And one of the most useful pieces of advice that I got that really helped me to understand how getting good at delegation was going to really, really help me was that this guy who I kind of came to sort of think of as a bit of sort of an unofficial mentor said to me, really, you should aim to only do things that only you can do. It's not always going to be possible. That should be your goal. Only do things that only you can do. If someone else can do it in your team, then it's your job to facilitate them doing it, because then they're doing that and you can concentrate on only doing the things that only you can do. And I find that a really helpful sort of check-in with myself around, when I'm working with a team, am I doing things that only I can do? And if you are doing things that only you can do, but you're still doing too much, that sort of starts to point to this idea of developing and delegating that we're going to get into today. So what are the types of delegation? What are the things that, why do you end up delegating? What are the reasons for delegating? And there's kind of 4 of these really in my experience. The first thing is you delegate for scale, the amount of work you've got done. You can't do everything, so you need to get other people to do that for you. That makes sense. That's the first reason generally that most new managers will start to delegate, because they've got too much work. It's also, so that's helpful for you as the manager. It's also helpful for the business because it means that you're able to get through more work more quickly and you're not bottlenecking at a certain point in the process. So delegating for scale is usually the first reason that people start delegating. The next one is interesting in that it doesn't really reflect on you particularly, it doesn't really have an impact on you particularly. This is about delegating for visibility. So what you're doing by delegating a task to a certain someone in your team is you're kind of raising their profile a little bit. And as part of your, a key part of your job as a manager of people, the main part of your job as a manager of people, I would argue, is to develop and grow the people in your team. Increasing the visibility of that person, increasing their profiling, making them stand out is a great way of doing that, starting that. So another reason to delegate a task is to shift some of the focus from you to somebody else, to enable them to stand out a little bit. The next thing, and this was something that I found very helpful once I started to understand it, is that you can delegate for your gaps. You can delegate the stuff that you're not very good at. So if you're not a particularly detailed focused person, you've got a research thing that needs to happen where you need to pull all these bits of information together, and that's not something that floats your boat, or not something that you know you're going to be good at, or something you know is going to take you longer than somebody else, you can delegate that. So it's a great way of doing the things that we've already said about, providing more scale to the business and providing more visibility to that individual, whilst protecting the business from your own gaps, protecting that piece of work from the things that you're not great at, also protecting yourself from having to do something that you find hard, and enabling you to focus on the things that only you can do. Only do the work that only you can do. And finally, the big one is for growth. So enabling the people in your team to grow and develop through doing new things. Because if you're hanging on to all the other bits of different kinds of work, then they're not going to be able to grow. And that's the difficult one, because they can only grow by being stretched. They can only be stretched by doing something they've not done before. And asking them to do something they've not done before feels like hard work. And we've all had that thought. All of us have that thought. It's just going to be quicker for me to do it myself. And yeah, I guess it'll be quicker for you to do it yourself once. But once you've done it a few times, it would have been quicker for you to show them how to do it. So getting comfortable with that idea that there will be a learning curve and that people won't be able to do it as quickly or in the same way as you to start with. Getting okay with all of that is the best way for you to be able to learn how to get rid of those things that you aren't great at, enable these people to grow, enhance their profile, and increase the scope and the scale of your team, and increase the amount of throughput. So those are kind of the 4 reasons that I generally feel like now, there might be a combination of things. You might need to delegate for scale, and in order to do that, you need to develop someone in to pick that up, so it becomes a growth one as well. They're not mutually exclusive, but it is helpful to know why you're doing it. It is helpful to understand, partly for their benefit, partly for your benefit, which one of these reasons you're using, which one of these reasons has led to you needing to delegate in the first place. So let's think about styles of delegation. Once you've worked out why you're delegating the piece of work and what your reason for delegating it is, then the question is how do you go about getting that piece of work done through another person? Because that's really what we're talking about. You're achieving something through another person or another group of people. And I love a 4-box. I really like a 4-box. I think they're always really helpful to me anyway in sort of in demonstrating what I'm trying to do. And I like this one, which is sometimes called situational management matrix or situational leadership matrix. But this is about thinking about where that individual is at. And it'll help you understand what kind of style you need to take with them. So if they are someone who is highly motivated, but are maybe low in the role and new in the role, and so therefore they're kind of low on the skills that they need. In those cases, you need to be a little bit more direct. You need to perhaps give them a checklist. You need to perhaps show them how to do something. They don't know how to do the job yet. They want to know how to do the job because they're really highly motivated, but they don't know how to do it yet. And in those situations, you need to be more directive. You need to be more, you do this first, and then you do this, and then you do this. And those are the situations that I think a lot of the time to managers just feel like this, oh, do I really have to, I just do it myself. But it's worth doing it, because what you're doing there is you're building the competence. If you build the competence, people understand what their job is and how to do their job better, they get more confident, and then it becomes a virtuous circle. If you've got the other way around, if you've got someone who's got high competence but low motivation, then you've got to think about how you can support them in their highly competent fashion to become more motivated to do that. What do they need in order for that role to be, in order for this task to be something that is doable for them? Now, that motivation could be a lack of confidence. It could be they've got concerns about their role more generally. So it's your job to understand and support them so that they feel able to do the task that you're offering them. They'll probably understand how to do it. Your role is to help them understand why they should be doing it, and give them what they need to get past that. If you've got someone who's got low motivation and a low level of competence, so maybe they're new in role and have come in from somewhere else in the business, and maybe they don't have great experience there, maybe they're a bit, they're going to require a bit more attention. They're going to need coaching through, so you can help them to build their confidence and their motivation, but also build their skill set. And so that might be that through each part of the thing that you've asked them to do, you're working with them, working alongside them, trying, moving them through it. And that will feel more slow, like it's a slower way of getting the work done. But, and this is the key thing to remember while you're going through all this, your goal here is not just to get the work done. Your goal here is to build people. And if you think about it from that perspective, it's easier to allow yourself the time to embed. Remember, we said in the last one, management takes time. Okay, none of this is easy and none of this is quick. But if you can spend the time with people initially, then you'll reap that time back in spades later. And then finally, if you've got somebody who is highly motivated and highly competent, and they will have got there through your directing and then coaching and then supporting. So someone might start here and then work through. But once you get somebody to delegate, then you'll be able to help. Then they can pretty much just get on with it. So when you're directing, you're telling them how to do it. When you're coaching, you kind of go, well, how should we do it? It's a side-by-side thing. When you're supporting someone who's low on their motivation but high on their skills, then it's kind of like, what do you need? So it's a bit of a shift. It's a shift from how should we do it to what do you need? And when you're delegating, it's kind of over to you. I trust you, off you go. Again, understanding why you're asking that person to do this thing. You're asking the person to do this thing because you think it'd be great for their profile. Okay, so that's something that is, it'll help you. You've already decided you're doing that. You've already decided you're giving it to this person that's going to help their profile. Then understanding where they fit on this and helping them understand why you've given them the role will make it, giving them a task will make it easier for them in the long run, make it easier for you. So going to think about a few sort of do and do nots from a point of view of how you go about getting people to do these things. How do you approach the process of asking someone to do something, and how do you approach and how do you manage that end-to-end process of them delivering it? Because it's not always going to be the same. But there are definitely some things you should try and do all the time, and there are definitely some things that you should try not to do ever. And we're going to go through some of those now. So do, and as a first thing, if you think about that scale angle, so delegating for scale, and also this will work for any of the kind of delegation styles, routine activities, things that happen over and over and over again. You should, if you're doing things like that in your role now, you should definitely be trying to shift those to give you yourself the bandwidth that you're going to need to do your job. Also, usually those things will be documented. Often they're not, but there might be a process that already exists that you can hand over to somebody else and say, right, I'd like you to own this going forward now. But if not, then maybe there's a gap there, and maybe you need to pull those. That maybe you need to spend some time doing the direct aspect of it or the coach aspect of it in order to turn this from something that's in your head into something that anybody can deliver. But if you've got repeated things that don't have a kind of business sensitivity, that they're kind of just the work that needs to happen, those will be the first things that you should try and delegate. They'll free up a massive amount of time compared to the effort to delegate them, and they enable you to get the hang of it's clear why they need to be delegated. So do delegate those. Do try and delegate by outcome. Be really clear about what it is that needs to be delivered and provide the necessary support to delivering that. But don't get hung up on the details. You work in a particular way, and maybe you found a particular way of doing something that's helpful. And by all means, show that person the way that you've done it. But all people are different people. And the way that it works for you might not be the way that makes most sense for them. And if you think about the snowman at the beginning, the easiest thing for me to do to get everybody to draw a snowman would have been to just say, could you please draw a snowman? Now, I wouldn't have got exactly the same snowman from all of you, but I'd have probably got closer than I think we got with me just telling you the shapes to draw. If there are particular details from that snowman that are important to me, like the fact he's got a hat, the fact he's got a carrot for a nose, I can tell you that. Can you please draw me a snowman with a top hat and a carrot for a nose? I'd rather he wasn't smoking a pipe, please. There you go. You've got your basic outcomes. How you get to that, what order you draw it in, how big the buttons are, kind of don't care, So think about what's important about that outcome. Is it desperately important that they use the template that you've created in order to get this report out? Or actually, maybe there's an easier way of doing it. To be fair, you did make that template 2 years ago, and you don't really understand the software that well. So maybe there's a better way of doing it. As long as the outcome's what you're after and they understand the outcome you're after, try to let go of the process a bit. It'll make your life easier. It'll make the task more enjoyable for them. And that kind of links to this one, which is encourage initiative. Okay, you've given them the outcome and you've told them what's important. Don't assume that they're going to feel comfortable in coming up with their own process and coming up with something that works well for them. You might be delegating for one of your gaps. Maybe you're particularly unconfident in Excel, and this particular task is going to someone who's great in Excel, and you're sort of aware that some of your formulas are a bit rubbish, or maybe you don't know, maybe you suspect that maybe your formulas are a bit rubbish, or that there's a faster way of doing it, or there's a prettier way of doing it. But people aren't necessarily going to be comfortable changing work that you've already done unless you tell them. So if you're handing over this piece of, so let's stick with the spreadsheet example, you're handing it over, you've given them the outcome, this is where we need you to get to. If there's a better way of doing it that you can see, please change it. I'm not precious about the way this is put together. Or I'm sure you can think of a better way of doing that because I don't really understand what I'm doing in here. Or is there a faster way of making that formula work? Ask the question, encourage the initiative. Some people will do it for their own bat, many won't. So don't assume that just because you've opened the door by not being prescriptive and giving them and managing it by outcome, don't assume that people are going to walk through the door. Okay, you need to encourage initiative. Sometimes you'll come across something that you desperately want to delegate, but it feels too big. You're like, there's no way I'm going to be able to delegate this because it's It's taken me 6 weeks to understand it. How long is it going to take me to explain it to Dave? So in which case, chunk it up, break it down into smaller parts. Maybe there's a bit of this that somebody else will be able to do very well. Maybe there's a bit of it that falls into the under routine activities. Maybe between 3 members of your team, they could nail the entire thing together. That could be a cool delegated project for them. Okay, so don't be afraid to, don't feel that like every piece of work that's on your plate, the entirety of it needs to be delegated. Think about what bits could be broken out and done by other people. And over time, maybe you just delegate an extra bit and an extra bit. And the way that you move an entire big piece of work off your plate and into the team is by delegating it a chunk at a time. So you don't need to do it all at once. And in some cases, it's a much better way of lifting the lid on the work in its own right by breaking it down along with the team and helping them understand it, and maybe them helping you understand some bits as well. So don't be afraid to break it up into chunks. And finally, remain accountable. Just because you've delegated this piece of work, it doesn't stop being your accountability. And that's a mistake that that I've made, and it's a mistake that that I see a lot actually, is that something gets delegated and the person who's delegated it just washes their hands of it, and that's not providing the support that your team needs. If something goes wrong with that, it's not cool for you to go, yeah, but I delegated it to them. That's not my fault. You're the manager now. You know, this is your world now, and you need to be the person who's stepping up to the plate in those situations. If you've delegated it and it's not worked out, that's kind of on you. So you need to remain accountable, remain in the loop, understand what's going on, and they're going to be more comfortable taking something new on and potentially making mistakes if they know that you've got their backs. And we'll be talking in the next session in a few weeks' time about psychological safety in teams, how to create a psychologically safe team, how to allow the making of mistakes in the pursuit of progress. And remaining accountable is a key part of that. You keeping the accountability of stuff that you've delegated. So do delegate routine activities. Do it via outcomes rather than a list of tasks. But when you do that, encourage your team to take the initiative. Tell them why it's better that they're doing it rather than you doing it. Break things into their component parts if you need to in order to make it easier to do. But you remain accountable even if somebody else is doing the work. So what we should not be doing, what are the do nots for delegating? To start with, if there is a task that adds no value whatsoever, or an activity that adds no value, stop doing it. Don't delegate it. Getting somebody else to do something that adds no value is more pointless than you doing it, because then you're spending the time delegating it and managing it. So as far as possible, before you delegate something, look at it and go, does this need to happen? Because if it doesn't need to happen, maybe you recommend that we just stop doing it altogether. It's very tempting to delegate something that feels like it adds no value because it's the obvious stuff to get rid of. But let's try and avoid that at all costs. Do not, this is a really, really common way that people like to delegate when they've not really thinking about it, especially if they're very busy, which is forwarding an email to someone in the team going, can you pick this up, please? And then you're completely forgetting about it. It rarely works unless you're sending it to someone hyper competent and hyper confident and hyper on it, in which case that person should probably be doing your job. You know, there are very, very few situations in which that works as a form of delegation. It could be that stuff is getting sent to you that shouldn't be being sent to you and should be being sent to someone else and is already somebody else's job. That's slightly different. And if you're getting sent stuff like that, then I think there's a communication process that you need to think about. But delegating something by just sending someone over an email saying, can you pick this up? Especially if it's the first time they've seen it, is not usually going to get yourself the best results. At least it's a sending it over to someone saying, I'd like you to pick this up. Let's have a chat about it later on. But you need to make sure there's some kind of briefing or conversation to give them the context that they need, and in case they need to ask any questions. Don't micromanage it. Don't micromanage it. This is the opposite of the encourage initiative thing. As long as it's delivered in the way that, as long as you get the outcome you need, how they get there does not always matter. So if you discover that they've done it and they've not used the specific calculator that you always used, unless there is a problem with the outcome or a potential problem with the outcome that could lead to, then and that's different. If there's a procedural thing that needs to be followed, it's your job to brief that in so that they can follow it. But they don't need to do things in exactly the same way that you do it. You need to set boundaries and agree how you're going to. You need to agree how you're going to communicate about the delegated piece of work. But micromanaging someone is the best way to make them feel not trusted, and the best way to demotivate them. So don't do that. Really, it's really hard, but try not to do that. It's really easy to always give work to the same person if you know that they're a safe pair of hands. If you've got someone on your team who's awesome and you can just give them stuff, it feels brilliant because you're just like, can you do that for me? Can you do that for me? And they're just doing it and they're smashing it and they're loving it. And then there's like somebody over there who's going, I could have done that. I'm a bit bored. Why are they getting all the interesting work? So be really mindful. And this comes back to why are you delegating and the delegation style involved. So if you've got something that you're delegating, if you're developing someone, if you know that somebody has ambitions to move up a grade or move into a different team, and you want to increase their visibility, and you're delegating for visibility, great, you're clear on that, and you should be thinking about the kind of tasks that you give that person. But also be thinking about not everything. That person is not going to be great at everything necessarily. So what other stuff that you're delegating would play to other strengths within the team. And if there is a reason why one person is a better fit for most of the work that you're delegating, there's a question in that as well. What's the skill mix in your team? Why is that the case? And kind of maybe that's a conversation within the team. Whereas, why is this person got more competence in this particular area than the rest of the team? How do we address that balance? So thinking about, try not to play favorites. Don't, it's a really important thing within the team anyway. But if you're finding it's your only option, my question would be, why is that the only option? What's the matter with the skills mix in the team that needs addressing? And finally, don't overdo it. Okay, don't over delegate. You still have to do some work. Okay, and there'll be some stuff that is not appropriate to delegate. It's really tempting when you start to get your delegate on, and you're sort of going, well, I can delegate that, I can delegate that, but there will be stuff that only you can do, and you need to be able to identify, no, this one I need to hang on to. If you're overdoing it, you're going to be delegating stuff that's not appropriate to delegate. You're going to be overwhelming the team as well. So a good mix of little and often to start with. Just get them used to the fact that you're going to be sending things over to them, but also you need to you're going to need to practice your skills and get yourself more comfortable with it. And they need to start to understand what your style is like so they know what to expect. So don't delegate non-value adding activity. Eliminate it. Don't fire and forget. You need to give people the opportunity to ask questions, and you need to make time to brief them. Don't micromanage. Agree the boundaries and the follow-up that you're going to make. Don't play favorites. Make sure that you're delegating appropriately to the right people. And don't over-delegate. Be mindful of how much you're delegating, so you're not overwhelming the team. I'm just aware of time, so we're going to. I want to leave some time for some questions. So I want to talk about a couple of tools that I've found really helpful in managing the practical elements of delegation. So there's some tricks here that I'd like to tell you about. And these are all from a book called Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity by David Allen, which I'm a big fan of. And if you've not come across it, highly recommend it. It saved my life as a new manager. And it's kind of the way it's my operating system, if you like, nowadays. So when you're briefing outcomes, helping the person to understand what it is you're after, there is a tool called the natural planning model, which I find really, really, really useful. And what it does is it enables you to work through a model that helps you with the briefing conversation. And the first is like the purpose. So why are we doing this thing? So you can sit down with the person and say, why are we doing this thing? This is the reason that this is happening. And then hopefully they can understand what this piece of work is contributing to, and they can start to understand, I guess, the rules of the game. Well, this is happening because of this. Therefore, implicitly, it doesn't involve this, it doesn't involve this, and it doesn't involve this. The second thing that you do after you've established the purpose is the vision. So what would this look like when it's done? The way David Allen talks about this in the book is, imagine you're having a party to celebrate it going really, really well. What would that look like? So describing, and once you've done this, so why are you doing it? Then you've described what really good looks like. That's a pretty good starting point from a delegation perspective, because you're helping that person understand what it is they're trying to achieve. The third bit is brainstorming. Now, you could do this with them, or they could do this on their own and then come back to you. It kind of, I do it, but I've done it both ways. The purpose and vision bit you do together. You brief it in like that. Then brainstorming is like all the possible things that we could possibly do in order to make this happen. Getting all of the ideas out there. And they could do that themselves. They could do it with you. It doesn't really matter, but it happens. And then you review it together. And then from that, you identify what are the activities that need to happen in order to be able to deliver that, which they then did go away and deliver, and they look after the actions. So the idea is that you've given them everything they need up top. They've come back to you with, this is a sort of plan, and you've gone, yeah, that looks great. And then they're off and doing it. What's nice about this is that because you've done this, and it helps to like write it all down so that they've got, there are templates available online and things for this, that where you could go, this is something that's very sort of straightforward and easy to go through, and they can check back on it. And it gives you a structure to understand what they're working through. So especially things that feel slightly larger, or especially with somebody who feels like they need that support and extra bit of information, this is a really, really good way of getting you both on the same page from a delegation point of view. Why are you delegating this in the first place? And the other things that, and I mentioned these two last week because they're just super, super useful. The key to good delegation a lot of the time is agreeing the kind of follow-up you're going to do. So is it a take this and do this and let me know when it's done? Or is it a do this and let me know the options before you do it? It can work in various different ways. It could be a, can you do this? And I don't even need to know when it's happened. I'm just going to assume you've done it type thing. All of those things can, there is a continuum, but you should agree that follow-up up front, because it avoids the micromanaging thing. If you say, okay, we've got this outcome, it needs to be delivered in 3 weeks' time. It's quite important, so and I'm going to be asked about it. So can we catch up on a Wednesday and Friday, just on where it's at, so I know what's going on, so that I can feed that back to people? Then you're setting the expectations, and you're not nagging them for an update. They know why you need to know about it. Or it could be, I just need to know when it's done. And you've set that expectation. It needs to be done in 3 weeks, and I just need you to tell me that it's done. The thing is, if you say that and they don't tell you it's done and you never ask about it, then you've not set great expectations for your follow-up. And if you delegate something to someone and they don't do it, and there is no consequence for them not doing it, that person is never going to do anything that you ask them to do ever again. So Having an agenda list and a waiting for list. An agenda list is a list of something you need to talk to somebody about, and a waiting for list, which is a list of things you are waiting for from somebody else. They're a great way of managing this stuff. And then you remember when you talk to that person in a one-to-one or in a different meeting that I was just waiting for an update on this thing. Where did that get to? And if it's not happened by the day you're expecting it to happen, then there's okay, I asked you to do that by then and it hasn't happened, and you hadn't told me it's not happened. What's going on? And how do we, and was I not clear enough? Was there something that you needed? Where did this go wrong? And then you can do but you've done the follow-up and you've made yourself available. That doesn't have to immediately be a big problematic conversation, but there does need to be some learning or consequence from something not happening. And the agenda list and waiting for list just help you stay on top of it, and you're not relying on your brain to remind you that there's a thing. So that's everything that I prepared. I'm just wondering if there are some questions.
Hi, Tim. Yes, we've got a couple of questions for you. Thanks for a really interesting session. Some really, really helpful tips then about delegation. So the first question is all about gaps. You said at the beginning of your presentation about delegating to fill the gaps in your own sort of skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, how do I know what my gaps are? And if I think I know where the gaps are, should I just rely on my own instincts, or should I ask other people where they think my gaps are so that I can sort of fill them by delegating to other people?
It's a really, really good question. So some of them you'll know, some of them you'll just have a suspicion that, you'll open up Excel and look at it and go, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I'd add a third question to this question actually, which is, how do I know my gaps? Who do I ask about my gaps? And also, what do I do about my gaps? Because some of those gaps you're going to want to fill yourself. Okay. There will be some things where you go, actually, so something that I realized at some point in the last sort of 10 years or so ago, I need to be a better typist. I spend a lot of time deleting words that I've typed. I need to be better at typing. That's not something anyone else can do for me, and I just need to do that. I would always ask for feedback. And if there's something that there is, and kind of going, where are my gaps? And you can ask that of your team. You can ask that of your manager. You can ask that with other people you work with. That's the best way of going to look, and a really easy way of doing that is just like a start, stop, continue. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I continue doing? Also, I quite like win or change. So what was our win, and what's something that we should change? So there's a kind of, again, and sometimes it's called keep or tweak. What's something that I should keep doing? What's something that I should tweak? So definitely ask for feedback. What I would say is there is a tendency of performance development in a lot of organizations to concentrate entirely on your gaps. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of not doing that. I'm a big fan of maximizing people's strengths. I spent a lot of time in performance development conversations in my 30s being told I needed to be better at project management. And frankly, I should not ever be let near a Gantt chart. It is not my skill set. It's not what I'm good at. And it was making me miserable, And once I actually got to the point where I was like, can I just have a project manager in my team? And can I concentrate on like doing the stuff that I'm good at? Things got better for me. So I think there's a line, there is a point where, yes, you sometimes need to build your strengths out. But if you've got someone who enjoys doing the stuff and is good at the stuff that you don't enjoy doing and are bad at, then they should be doing it, because you should only do things that only you can do.
Yeah, and I think that leads on to the next question, which is all about making sure, asking the question is, should we have that diversity across our teams so that your team, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and if you've got a new member coming into the team, is it a good idea to try and plug those gaps as well in terms of skill set?
What is there's a great tool that I use for this in most teams that I work with now, which is a skills matrix. So thinking about what are all the skills that we need to have within the team in order to deliver our work, and who's got those skills. And you can kind of mark it out on a scale of 1 to 4, which is, 1 is, I don't really know what this is. 2 is, I know it, but I couldn't explain it to someone else. 3 is, I'm pretty good at this and I could explain the basics to somebody else. And 4 is, I'm an expert and I could train somebody else to do it. And you look through it, and not everyone needs to be an expert in every area, but you can look through it and go, okay, in this particular area, we need 2 experts, and everyone else needs to be, 3, sort of decently competent. Where are we? Okay, we're there. Great, we're there. But then if somebody leaves, you can get what kind of a hole does that leave?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you're then recruiting to fill that hole necessarily. It might be you're recruiting to fill a slightly different hole, and you need to a couple of people need to step up. But it gives you a bit of a sense for what the skills gap is. So, but yes, you want to have, as I believe that you need a team of people who are able to be broadly effective in most of the areas that your team looks at, whilst having deep skill sets in 1 or 2 areas. And then, but yeah, I don't believe in banging square people into round holes.
So then this again leads into the next question, which is about you really then need to know your team and know their skill sets from the off to be able to delegate effectively to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But to be honest, I think that's job 1 as a manager is getting to know your people. If you don't know them well enough to delegate to them, you probably don't know them well enough to manage them effectively either. And I would encourage doing that through good old-fashioned human ways of speaking to people and spending time with them, rather than through something like, I don't know, your Myers-Briggs or your Insights Discovery or whatever like that. Those things have their place, and they can be useful, but if you need to do that with a team of 8 people, or whatever it happens to be, in order to be able to understand how to delegate to them, then I'd suggest you're using it wrong. So job 1 as a manager is get to know people. You don't need to know what the cats are called. You don't need to know all of that. Just need to, like, what makes them tick at work. And if they want to tell you more about their lives, and then be interested. But the important thing is what makes them happy at work, what makes them thrive, what makes them tick, what's the opposite of all of those things.
So what advice would you give then to a new manager coming into a new company? How do they get to know their team's skill set quickly when they've got to hit the ground running?
Well, to start with, you're a new person in a new organization, and no one's expecting to hit the ground running. No one hits the ground running. Okay, so you can take that pressure off yourself. And if there is an expectation for you to hit the ground running, then this is the best time in the world to push back on that, because you're new in a new organization. I would set aside time to spend a decent amount of time one-on-one with those people, and doing that in a less pressured environment. So doing it off-site, taking them out for lunch, spending time with, doing things like that. Sit with them while they do their work, understand what their job is, ask them where their challenges are. But it's through spending time. You can do it remotely, but it's much better if you can do it face to face. I know that that's not always possible nowadays. Spending time with them, understanding what their work is, how it all fits together, what their aspirations are, where they where they want to improve, where are they not bothered with improving, and talk to the team as a whole. When are we good as a team? When do we suck as a team? When last time it went wrong, what happened? Last time it went really well, what happened? And build it up like that. But it really is just down to time and conversations.
Okay, that's great. Got a couple more questions coming through. How do you keep motivating people in doing difficult tasks as part of their development?
That's a really difficult question, or it's a really tough question without knowing the context. I would say there is a piece around they need to understand why they need to do the thing that's difficult. Why do they need to do that thing? Why is it? And there's a couple of things wrapped up in that. Why is it important for the business that they do this thing? Why is it important that it's difficult? Why is it important that they are the person who's doing it? Maybe you can frame the difficult task as a difficult problem. You know, this needs to happen. It's either we do a difficult task or we find an easy way of doing it as a team. How do we go about doing that? Framing the problem as something else that they might find more interesting is sometimes a good way of doing it. If you cast your mind back to the last session, motivation is made up predominantly of purpose. So why am I doing this thing? Autonomy, so the ability to make decisions for yourself, and mastery, being really good at something. So if you can tap into ideally all three, but at least two of those things. So we're doing this because like this really difficult task needs to happen because the future proofing of the business absolutely depends on it, and we can't, move into Web3 or AI or whatever unless we do this task. And you're the best person to do this because of your skill set or your aptitude or the way you do it. You've hit mastery, you've hit purpose. Try and you build it around that. It's kind of like explaining why them, explaining why it's important, explaining why it has to happen.
Okay, thank you. So this question relates to the question a couple of questions ago. So rather than this as a new person coming into a company, how about an internal promotion into a managerial position? Knowing that you have a highly competent number of individuals within the team, how do you manage that expectation on the new manager?
This is always difficult, especially if some of those other highly competent individuals also wanted to be the manager, and they aren't now. If that's the case, I'll squash that as quickly as I can, and by just having an open conversation about it. If you don't do that, that sort of stuff can fester. And then I think it's just, it's very difficult to argue with being super honest. Like even the most awkward person really, really struggles with disarming honesty. So if you're there, you're in a team with a bunch of very, very highly competent people, and you're a new manager, and you're kind of like, okay, that's the situation. Like they all know that's the situation. That's the situation. There's no problem with admitting to it. I'm new. You're all awesome. Okay, what do I need to know? Okay, my job's to make your job easier. At the end of the day, as a manager, your job is to make them more effective by taking away all the stuff that's getting in their way. If you were going to boil it down, what do you need from me? What's the best way of us as a team being successful? Everyone has an opinion on how their job could be easier.
Okay, thank you very much. Just checking if we've got any more questions at the moment. Anybody else that's with us this afternoon like to ask any questions? No, I don't think we're going to get any more this afternoon. So I think we'll, the person that just asked that question has said thank you very much for that answer, as that's her biggest concern. So thank you for that.
Oh, no, not at all.
Brilliant. So as we haven't got any more questions, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you, Tim, for sharing your knowledge with us and giving us so many great tips to do delegation. I know I'm going to be taking some of those away with me. This session was the second of 4 management skills webinars that Tim has developed for IIRSM. And they're all aimed at new or developing managers. So our next sessions are on the 10th of January and the 6th of March 2024. They'll come around very quickly, I'm sure. So thank you to everybody that's joined us this afternoon. The recording of the webinar will be on the IIRSM Resource Hub, so members, You will be able to recap or catch up on anything in your own time. Just a reminder, because I know a couple of people asked in the chat function, the book that Tim referred to was Getting Things Done by David Allen. So do go and pick yourself up a coffee and have a read of that, because it is a very, very good book. So I think we'll end the webinar there. Thanks ever so much again, Tim, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.